From the Arizona Daily Star and Tucson.com, this is the Wildcast.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the season wrap-up episode of the Wildcast podcast. I'm Justin Spears here with Alec White, and we are recording at the Arizona Daily Star Studios. Going to put a bow on the Arizona basketball season, talk about both the men's and the women's basketball teams. For the latest in U of A sports and other Southern Arizona sports, make sure you download the Wildcaster app for free off the App Store and Google Play, and be sure to download and subscribe to the Wildcast podcast. Subscribe, rate, and review. We greatly appreciate it. I noticed we got a couple more reviews for our podcast in the month of March, but
were they good reviews?
They're good reviews.
Okay,
we got some 5-star reviews. A lot of people were very complimentary of our podcast during the basketball season, and we appreciate all of your comments. But please keep them coming. Give us that 5-star rating. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think about the podcast. That helps us out on all of those platforms, whether it's Apple, Spotify, or other podcasting platforms. And as always, be sure to follow us on all social media platforms at The Wildcaster. Check us out on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, you name it, we're there. Give us a follow. All right, Alec, so we're going to talk about both the men's and the women's basketball teams, what we took away from this past season. And then we're also going to get into the mailbag questions left by all of our listeners and followers of our content on Twitter. A lot of submissions on Twitter, so thanks to all of those who participated. We'll get to your questions here in just a little bit. But when you look at the entire season as a whole, I think with the women's team, the expectations, I think they were what they were. Like, you lose Ari McDonald, you lose pretty much the best player in program history. I mean, that's a big void to fill. Kate Reese was kind of that person that rose to the challenge and was Arizona's leading scorer. She was consistently their best player. But, I mean, Arizona's ceiling, they pretty much hit that in the NCAA tournament, losing in the second round. I thought they might have made it to the Sweet 16. But, I mean, when you lose Ari McDonald and you don't have that bona fide scorer, I mean, that's just going to be really hard to replicate what you had the season before, which was going to the national championship.
Yeah, and Dia Barnes said in the preseason when we were asking her back in October, November, what's the outlook for this team? She said, the loss of Ari is huge, but the way you combat that is having depth. And it looked like early in the season, Arizona was going to have a ton of depth that was going to make up for that. The loss of Ari, and you had transfers like Coy Love, Araya Copeland, Taylor Chavez. Those were all bona fide Power 5 players come into your program, and the prevailing thought was early in the year they were going, to make a big run. They jumped out to an 11-0 start. They beat number 6 Louisville in the first week of the season. They climbed as high as I want to say 4th or 5th.
Yeah, they were a top 5 team.
They were a top 5 team, in December. Then the COVID pause. The team gets derailed by that. You have a couple losses, and then the lack of leadership started to show. I know Sam Thomas and Kate Reese, they're bona fide U of A legends, but you needed somebody else to kind of fill that gap left by Ari, and they're just Shayna Pellington did a really good job in certain parts of the year, and then the other parts, a lot of criticism went her way, and some of it was warranted, some of it wasn't. But when you look at the totality of the Wildcat season, you knew there wasn't going to be the same firepower run in Magic without Ari McDonald in March, and a lot of U of A's flaws came out. And the same thing with the men's team that we're going to talk about, the flaws that were there at the beginning of the season. Your flaws are way more exposed in March when you run into tough teams.
Yeah.
And so Arizona just didn't have the same scoring punch on the women's side. And really, they dealt with the injury to Kate Reese, and you had some other issues throughout the season. Adia Barnes and Kelly Graves having their, incident
clash. A little bit,
yeah. And it seemed like those two were made up, and then maybe that situation just kind of lingered because Adia Barnes said after the North Carolina loss to end the season that there were things that she looks back on and wish she handled differently. And I think she was kind of referring to that, maybe some other things. And so I still think it was overall a successful season for Arizona women's basketball. You made it back to the NCAA tournament. You had some big wins during the year, but ultimately, a slight step back because now you're dealing with some transfers, but the program's still in great shape because you have a loaded recruiting class come in. So a mixed bag for the women's team, but ultimately a good overall season for them.
And even though that, like you said, you kind of take a step back this year, they still kind of checked something off their little checklist under Adia Barnes, and that they finally hosted the first round of the NCAA tournament.
Yep.
Which they never had done in several years. I mean, you have to go back to the Joan Bonvicini days to talk about hosting the first round of the NCAA tournament. And even then, you look at Adia Barnes, right? She gets Arizona to a championship, one bucket away from actually winning the whole damn thing. You have this All-American in Aaron McDonald, and you bring in all these accolades. Like, there were all these things that the women's basketball team had done, and they were just kind of accomplishing one milestone at a time. This year, they finally were able to host the first round of the NCAA tournament, because you remember they were going to do it in the 2019-20 season. Then COVID, shut down the whole year. Then last year they had the bubble in San Antonio. So for them to finally say we hosted an NCAA tournament, I think is a huge accomplishment for Adia Barnes and her program. But you bring up the recruiting class, Paris Clark is a bucket getter. I mean,
five-star guard,
5-star point guard. She's going to be fantastic for Arizona. The Gilbert guard from Tampa, Florida. Last year she averaged just under 30 points per game. And so she's what I call a walking bucket. And then you add in Zeke Najee's little sister, Maya Najee, who's a McDonald's All-American and is a 5-star prospect. So reinforcements are on their way. And I think you're going to see the new era of Arizona women's basketball with these recruits come in. And it's going to take the Wildcats over the hump.
And you touched on it, talking about the recruits, that they're bucket getters. They're more offensively gifted. Adia Barnes, when she started this program, her base, what she built the foundation around was defense. And I still think defense and guarding and really making opponents work for their points is still going to be a staple with Adia Barnes teams. But I think you're going to see the offense start to maybe be more of a predominant factor with Adia Barnes' teams, because man, you watch some of these games this year, and you could really see the lack of scoring punches that they had outside. Once teams were able to take away Kate Reese, then it was all of a sudden Shayna Pellington had to do all the work. And there were games where Sam Thomas, where she had 15 or 18 points and was hitting her threes. When that's not happening, Sam Thomas in many ways just focuses on her defense and distributing the ball, where she's not much of a scoring threat. So I think the next step for Adia Barnes in this journey that the women's team is on is to bring a high-level offense and mix that with the stifling defense they've played. It's a hard style to have both elite offense and defense, but that's what the best teams in women's basketball have.
Now moving over to the men's side, because the women's basketball team, going to be very interesting next year with the new recruits coming in. I'm curious where they land in the AP Top 25, but for the men's side, Tommy Lloyd has officially set the bar high for him moving forward, because he completely smashed every expectation that he had in year one at Arizona. The Wildcats were voted to finish 4th in the conference at the start of the year in the preseason media poll. They were tied with Oregon State. And you look at how both teams ended the season. Arizona had 3 losses. Oregon State had 3 wins. So completely polar opposite seasons right there for the Wildcats and the Beavers. And even our very own Bruce Pascoe, the beat writer here at the Arizona Daily Star, he had the Wildcats finishing 6th in the conference in the preseason media poll. So that shows you what people were thinking about the Wildcats. Even with the postseason media, or the postseason ban, the self-imposed ban that they took because of the NCAA investigation and the infractions, the postseason ban that they took I mean, they were still a pretty solid team, like a team that could make the tournament. But then you thought, well, how good is this actual team now that they have postseason to look forward to? What kind of jump is Ben Mathurin and Azuolas Tubelis going to make from year 1 to year 2? How about Dalen Terry? What about Christian Coloco? He's now going into his 3rd year with the program. How is he going to look? There were just so many questions going into Tommy Lloyd's first season. And then the biggest question of them all was, can this guy actually coach? Because he's never been a head coach before. He's always had Mark Few, a guy that's been his mentor at Gonzaga. He's had that guy be his boss for the last 22 years. How can Tommy Lloyd adjust to being the guy that oversees, the guy that runs the entire program? And they smashed every single expectation. He came in, established his fun brand of basketball, this fun up-tempo style of play that we haven't seen since the Lute Olson days. And with that being said, not only did he let these guys run free on the court, but he kind of let their personality show too.
Oh, yeah.
There were so many times under the Sean Miller era where you felt like guys were muzzled. And guys, they were trained to just be media robots and not show off their personalities. This year's Arizona team, they weren't afraid to show off who they really were. Now, does it come back and bite you in the butt? Yeah, because people would love to see
your downfall.
Yeah, because people were like, okay, I can't wait to see this Kirk Kriisa guy lose the NCAA tournament. This Dalen Terry guy seems to be he's having too much fun. He's too cocky. I can't wait for these guys to lose in the tournament. And you saw that in the big dance. But when I look back at this season, yeah, they lost in the Sweet 16 as a number 1 seed, and this really felt like the year that they could have gotten over the hump 21 years later, get into the Final Four. But considering how we viewed this Arizona team, I viewed this season as a success for Tommy Lloyd and his staff, and now he set the bar high for future teams.
We had a podcast, it was in like mid-February. We're getting ready, discussing, hey, what are the expectations for this team in March, and how will we view this team? And I think, a little bit what I said, if I can remember correctly, is that, if Arizona didn't make a Final Four, given where they were at, in mid-February, they were going to win the Pac-12 regular season title. I think they had just beaten USC to clinch it, and we were just kind of going back and forth on how it was going to be viewed. And I said it's going to be viewed as successful no matter what. Like no matter what happens in the tournament, it's unless it's a 16-1 scenario, which it didn't happen. Arizona was going to be having a good season. Like people are going to think like, hey, mission accomplished, even if they didn't get to a Final Four. I still feel that's the case. I think there's going to be a little bit of man, they were right there once again, but really just an exciting season. One of the top watches in college basketball. You turn on a Texas Tech game or a Tennessee game, even Houston, Arizona's team. You could pick one. You can watch Houston for an entire season and make the Elite Eight, winning games like 60-50, which is what Houston was doing on average.
That was our bread and butter.
Or you could go, the Sweet 16, 33-4, and lose to a team like Houston that controlled the base. I think Arizona fans would would keep what Arizona had this season, being able to watch for an entire season a fun basketball team from start to finish, and be okay with a loss, because the journey was just so incredible. It came out of nowhere, but it was the way they played, the up-tempo, it was unlike anything we've seen since the Lute Olson days.
When all the unique storylines, too, really made this season special for Arizona. So Azuolas Tubelis has that ankle injury, and then Oumar Ballo, because Kim Aiken is no longer with the team anymore, Oumar Ballo is kind of forced to have a bigger role in the front court. So you see Oumar Ballo, gradually getting better over the course of the season, which was just so awesome to watch. And then you also add in Dalen Terry being the all-time glue guy for the Wildcats and being kind of like an Andre Iguodala-esque player. Ben Mathurin taking that step from being a fringe NBA draft pick to surefire lottery pick. Like, there's no doubt. Like, Ben Mathurin is gone. I know a lot of Arizona fans seem to think that there's a possibility that Ben Mathurin could come back. when you're a guaranteed lottery pick, you are either delusional or you must absolutely love your school, or both, to to say, you know what, I'm going to pass up this money and I'm going to come back. Let's get another crack at this. So you can guarantee that Ben Mathurin is going to be gone. But, I mean, shoot, he's the Pac-12 Player of the Year. He's an All-American. The numbers that he put up this year and the moments that he also had, too. I mean, when Arizona was in that game against TCU, Alec, I told you this. This is actually true. We were sitting next to each other. I had the link open on my computer to change my flight on Southwest Airlines. Yeah. Because I thought Arizona was going to lose that game against TCU.
A minute and a half to go, and we're like, oh, when are we?
They're going to lose.
Yeah, when are we leaving?
They're going to lose. They're actually going to lose this game. And then Ben Mathurin, has that gutsy 3-pointer. His feet are touching the March Madness logo. Drains it.
One of the best clutch shots in U of A history.
And then, but moments before that, when he went in the lane and had that dunk on TCU big man Eddie Lampkin Jr., for about 6 seconds, you and I became unprofessional. Because it was just one of those moments.
Out-of-body experiences.
Exactly. It was just because, I've never seen a dunk like that in person since the Raleigh Alkins dunk in the Pac-12 tournament against USC. But, how just surprising it was for him to elevate like that and just cock back and dunk it. We could feel it in the arena. And so I stood up, you were kind of shaking my arm for a few seconds, and then we came professional again. We sat back down, became reserved. But those moments, that's what made the season so fun. And then, all the comebacks, right? Arizona would go down, 16-3 early on in the game and then go on a 20-2 run.
That was ASU game. The Illinois game when they kind of put their stamp early in the season. Just some pivotal regular season moments too. That how big of it for Arizona getting the monkey off your back, beating UCLA, not once but twice during the year. You took a absolute shellacking to them in Pauley, and it was kind of maybe Arizona doesn't have the horses to go toe-to-toe with a Final Four caliber team. They come back the next week, beat UCLA, playing UCLA style, because that was a slowed-down game.
Yeah.
Kurt Kriisa hits a 3. Then you beat USC at home 2 days later. It was the first time in, 10 years or so that you've beaten AP top 25 teams in the same weekend. Then you go and beat ASU at their place with a 16-3 run. You put the stamp on the Pac-12 regular season crown, absolutely crushing USC in the first half. That was the best first half of an Arizona game this season at USC. Then, just the perseverance they showed in the Pac-12 tournament, almost losing to Stanford, but losing Kurt Kriisa to the ankle injury, then beating Colorado. Then all of a sudden you find yourself down 12 to UCLA in the Pac-12 championship game, and you storm back to win and secure a number 1 seed. Forget, just wipe out losing to the loss to Houston, but there was just so many powerful moments. We didn't even talk about hosting College Game Day for the 4th time in school history. Just so many. We talked about the women's program checking off boxes. Man, the men's team checked off a whole slew of monumental boxes this season. Yeah,
and now next year, Tommy Lloyd's also probably going to return a bunch of his players.
Yeah.
We talked about Ben Mathurin being the guy that is a surefire NBA lottery pick, and he's going to be gone. But, what does that mean, for the Wildcats this upcoming season? And I think this loss to Houston, and I know Arizona fans are very disappointed, but I think this could really be a good launching pad for Arizona going into next year, because now they know what their flaws are. They're like, okay, this is what makes us a good team, that we can slow it up. We can play, the kind of slugfest style of basketball. You brought up the UCLA game. I mean, they went super big down the stretch. They had Umar Ballo and Christian Coloco to end both games. But the game at McHale Center and then the game in the Pac-12 tournament, though, that was the front court that they had to end the game.
Mm-hmm.
So, you can go big and you can play that slower style of pace, but then you can go smaller and then really play up-tempo style of basketball. So you know what you can do best. But then you go back to that Houston game. and that's kind of like their kryptonite. I mean, TCU was a solid offensive rebounding team. And Eddie Lampkin Jr., he had 10 offensive boards by himself. Houston's like, well, we do that, but we do it much better
and we
than
score.
TCU. And we score a little bit. So, Kyler Edwards was phenomenal from 3-point range against Arizona. And then, of course, the Cougars go 1 for 20 the next round in the Elite Eight. Mm-hmm. So, of course, they only show up for Arizona, but then the next round that they fall asleep. But Arizona knows that, okay, against physical teams, we can't allow them to get offensive boards. We have to do a much better job on the defensive rebounding aspect. And then now we know our flaws. We know what our weaknesses are. Now let's move forward with it.
Yeah, and I think after you just kind of sitting back the last couple of days, watching who made the Final Four, who didn't, just observing the tournament teams, the loss to Houston really isn't that surprising. One, because it was a bad matchup for Arizona, but two, you look at the teams that made the Final Four, put aside Duke for a second, because Duke is in its own class. They've got, most experienced head coach, Coach K, and they assembled the most talent out of anybody. But all the other three, UNC, Kansas, and Villanova, those are like some of the most experienced teams in the country. And we saw experience play out around elsewhere. I mean, people forget about Houston. Houston is basically UCLA because they're both Final Four teams, but everyone's like, oh, UCLA coming into this year, they're going to be a Final Four contender. They've got the same cast of crew as, going up against Gonzaga. It's basically the same team. It's basically the same Houston team too.
Yeah.
So you're taking a battle-tested Houston team in the tournament. They're a 5 seed when they probably should have been a 3 or a 4 seed. And Houston won their games. They won their conference. Had a 28-5 regular season record, and they were just a matchup nightmare for Arizona. So it's disappointing, yes, that Arizona exited in the Sweet 16, didn't get a crack at earning that Final Four berth. But I think it's really not surprising when you take a look at what the other results in the tournament were, what Arizona's flaws were, and what Houston was good at. It all just kind of was this perfect storm that didn't go Arizona's way.
And we asked our listeners if you could send over questions on Twitter, and we got a bunch of submissions, Alex. So now's the part of the podcast where we're going to get into the season wrap-up mailbag. Thanks again to all who submitted on Twitter. Let's go to our first one. Garrett Rosnovsky asked, how do we feel about any players transferring to Xavier, and what's up with Kerr? He put down the bear down emojis. I don't think anybody's transferring to Xavier. I mean, unless you're really that attached to Sean Miller.
Shane Noel?
I mean, Shane Noel is probably the only guy that I could see transferring, but that's Cincinnati, Ohio. I mean, I feel like if he were to transfer, he'd stay along the West Coast and stay close to home to Seattle.
And Tommy recruited all of these players. Like a lot of them were already in the transfer portal last offseason.
Yeah.
And Tommy brought him back. We've heard nothing but great things about how much players have enjoyed playing for Tommy Lloyd. So I know Kerr put out kind of like a cryptic Instagram post. It was like, thank you for everything, Tucson. And then, I believe he's updated it since to just be, Tucson with a heart emoji or something to that effect. So I don't see, anybody that jumps out that would have an immediate effect on transferring. Maybe a rotation player, maybe, Shane Noel, but Adama Ball, Tommy recruited him. Tommy Lloyd brought Umar Ballo.
Mm-hmm.
Dalen Terry isn't going to transfer. His decision is going to be NBA or return to Arizona. Kerr Kriisa, the way Arizona's offense is perfect for what he does, even if he's maddeningly inconsistent with it. I think there's not a lot of other places for him to go that would suit his style of play. So Pella Larson, Tommy brought him over. So I don't really see a key guy that would be leaving unless it's the NBA.
We're going to talk about Kerr's role next season coming up here in just a few minutes. Jacob asks, when will we have final decision on IARP findings for Arizona? What does Tommy Lloyd need to do this offseason to build on this past season's success? How does he keep the momentum going? Is the bar set too high now based on this past season's success? I don't think the bar is set too high. I mean, they went to the Sweet 16. And, a program like Arizona, the bar is always getting to the Final Four, even though you haven't been there in 21 years. I mean, fans, every single time you get to the big dance, they're expecting you to get to the Final Four. So I don't think the bar is set too high for Tommy Lloyd. I mean, because the bar has always been set very high for Arizona basketball. And how does he keep the momentum going? I mean, I think that recruits are lining up at the door for Tommy Lloyd right now. And I'm talking about transfer portal guys. So I like the kind of the Villanova blueprint that Tommy Lloyd has right now, because the only freshman that he really played this year was Adama Ball, and those were only in pinches. I think it's going to be the same moving forward, unless you're like a great 5-star freshman like a Kylan Boswell, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. You're not going to be playing as a freshman at Arizona, and that's good because you need veteran guys on your team to rely on in the tournament. Villanova has been doing that for many, many years, and that's why Jay Wright is playing in his, how many Final Four at this point?
Third Final Four in 6 seasons.
Third Final Four in 6 seasons. Ask how many Final Fours
And one of those years was the COVID year, I think.
Yeah. Ask how many Final Fours has John Calipari, Kentucky, been to in that span? So there's a blueprint. One and done. I know that's the era that we're in right now, but Jay Wright and Villanova has shown that you need older guys to rely on in the tournament, and I think Tommy Lloyd and the Wildcats are going to take that route, and then they're going to rely on a lot of transfer portal guys. That's why you might only see maybe 1 or 2 high schoolers joining the Wildcats every single recruiting class. And then as regarding the IARP decision, I think that's going to be a summer thing. In the heart of the summer, maybe like a July, August kind of thing, things are slow and they might just drop the bomb on Arizona. And what will that result be? I know NC State, they also went through the IARP process. Yeah. They did the self-imposed postseason ban, and then they essentially got like a slap on the wrist and scholarship reduction, and also limited recruiting. So they cut off times that coaches can talk to recruiting, which again, for Arizona, that's soup, that's small potatoes. I don't think the NCAA is going to put down the hammer on Arizona, because all the guys who are now at Arizona, they had nothing to do with what happened 4 or 5 years ago.
And they're already they were already one under the scholarship limit during the season anyway.
Yeah.
So when we first introduced, got to talk to Tommy about, it was this time a year ago, he was asked about that, and he's like, he's expecting something to come, but who knows when it's going to be. And, Arizona's prepared to handle it should something come down. But, you nailed it, Justin. It, could be recruiting restrictions and maybe a loss of scholarship, but, postseason ban is not going to happen.
No. Brad Malone, shout out to Brad. He asked, what do we have to do to get the Cactus logo back on the court at McKill? It's $1 million question, Brad.
If you have enough money to buy the advertising money that goes along with the court name, that's really, because you've got I think it's Banner advertises where if you have the full Cactus logo, it would cover up the Banner Medical that's placed drawn on the court. So if you can pay off the hospital in advertising money, then that Cactus logo could be back.
It's yours.
It's not coming back anytime soon.
Need it at least like under the basket,
Yeah. Maybe, a patch on the back of the jersey or something.
Yeah. All right. B Swing 55. Who else do we think will leave other than Ben and Kyer, whether it's transfer or opting for the draft? I'm nervous that one of, if not both, CeeLo and DT are gone, and heard rumors or Noel possibly wanting to transfer. Shane Noel, we'll kind of leave that up to him. I'm not sure where his mind is at. We never even had a chance to talk to him this year. But for Christian Koloko, he's flirting with like late first round, early second round. I think Dalen Terry's a safe bet to come back. And the one thing for Christian Koloko that could be a selling point for Tommy Lloyd to get him to return is international guys can make NIL money now. So, do you have an NIL deal in place for Christian Koloko? Like let's say money is a big factor into his decision. Well, he can have an NIL deal that brings in thousands of dollars for him and his family, and then he can become an all Pac-12 player, become Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year again, and be just an absolute force for the Arizona Wildcats. Be for sure like one of the top centers in college basketball, and then play your way into the lottery and then make even more money. But I don't know. These are good problems for Christian Koloko, because at the end of the day, money is going to be put in his pocket.
And the thing with him and Dalen Terry, they can. It's weird to kind of have these conversations, because Arizona, if you get both of them back, they're loaded. But you also have a scenario where you have, as a player, you have to maximize your value right now, your career, and it's. No one's going to fault Dalen Terry or Christian Koloko, because they can both play in the NBA, next season and carve out roles with teams. But the thing for both of them that's maybe not the case with some past Arizona players that we've had discussions about, should so-and-so, should Alonzo Trier or Raleigh Alkin, should they stay or go? Those two were always going to be kind of borderline late first round, early second round guys. Neither really projected to be lottery picks. Koloko could play himself into a lottery, back end of the lottery. And same with Dalen Terry. Like, Dalen Terry could be the guy. He could be the Ben Mathurin of next year's Arizona team, where you do everything. The one thing Dalen Terry improved on so much in the last half of the season was his shooting percentage and scoring. Like, how many big threes did he hit down the stretch of the season? There was at least 4 or 5, maybe 6 big-time buckets that Dalen Terry had, where he became more of a scorer and less of a, distributor or glue guy, where he was really taking off. And he could have the same effect as Ben Mathurin did this year, where you have that 2-year plan, which would be 3 years for DT. But really, he wasn't a featured role his first season at Arizona. This year, he was much more featured, especially late, and you can only see him getting better. Yeah. But that's also the thing you have to worry about, is NBA scouts and GMs can pitch that to you and say, you're only getting better. We get you in now, and by this time next year, you're going to be have a spot on a team after a stint in the G League or some time on the NBA bench. So that's the game you play for these guys, and I would assume, heart of hearts, I think one stays, one goes. I couldn't tell you which way it's going to be, but I feel like one of them is bound to leave.
I'm looking at a lot of these questions here, and a lot of them are the same or repeat, so let's just kind of lump it all together. People are curious about what next year's roster is going to look like, what the rotation is going to be. And this is where we get to the Kylan Boswell talk. So currently, Arizona's 2022 recruiting class is set with the 4-star forward Dylan Anderson, who is named Gatorade Player of the Year for the state of Arizona for the second year in a row. And he's, a 7-footer, very versatile forward, can kind of be like a Lauri Markkanen type of player under Tommy Lloyd. But he's the only 2022 commit. Now, Kylan Boswell is a 5-star point guard. He's a part of the 2023 recruiting class, but a lot of people seem to speculate that he is going to reclassify and join the Wildcats in 2022. And if that were to happen, that'd be great for Arizona, because I think that allows a guy like Kirk Kreese to have more of an off-ball type of role. But you also have a shooting guard who can also handle and distribute as well. And if you add in Dalen Terry as well to that mix, that's 3 guys right there in your backcourt that you can all rely on to play point guard in some shape or form. I like Kylan Boswell. He's a dog. He's like a guy that's going to attack the rim and drive. And I think that was missing with Arizona with Kirk Kreese at point guard.
Just a primary, great passer, really good vision, spotty shooter.
Yeah.
But didn't really attack the lane. Didn't shoot free throws a lot.
Yeah,
like how many he would kind of drive and kick, but didn't necessarily have the athleticism to blow by people in the paint.
Yeah, and finish.
Yeah, it was just not his game.
And especially when he got hurt, he was not penetrating at all. Like he was hugging the 3-point line, and so that allowed Arizona's offense to kind of take a step back in the tournament. So I think when you have a healthy Kerr Kriisa sliding over to where Ben Matherin's role was, because obviously Ben's leaving for the NBA, so you can have a backcourt of Kylan Boswell, Kerr Kriisa, Dalen Terry, Azuolas Tubelis, and then at the starting center spot, it's either going to be Christian Koloko, who decides to come back, or Oumar Ballo. That's still a pretty solid lineup for Arizona. But then what do you also do with Adama Ball? Because a lot of people, including myself, seem to think that Adama Ball could be Ben Matherin's replacement as well. So, I mean, Arizona's going to have depth. But what happens with Kerr, that's going to be the one thing that I'm curious. Because, I mean, do you put Adama Ball in the starting lineup, have Kylan Boswell start, and then move Kerr Kriisa to the bench? That'd be a tough sell for Kerr.
I don't think you can bench Kerr.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
The only thing that concerns me about putting Kerr at the 2, and Arizona will they'll figure this out. Their coaching staff knows more than I, but he is not great defensively either. So you'd have, he's kind of, Arizona will rotate and switch guys, but if he's on at the 2, you're guarding some bigger dudes, unless Arizona decides to switch and put Kylan at Kerr guards the other team's point guard and Kylan guards the 2 guard. So certainly possible, but I think Kerr's defensive liabilities is where Arizona would need to figure it out, and playing off ball might help him conserve some energy and be able to be a little bit better on the defensive side too.
So realistically, what do you think next year's rotation is? Like, who are the guys that are playing for the Arizona Wildcats next year?
I mean, Kylan. I mean, you pretty much hit it. I don't differ too much from you. Kylan, Kerr in the backcourt. I'm still undecided on who's gonna be point guard and who's gonna be shooting guard. And Dalen Terry at the 3, Tubelis 4, and I think it'll be Oumar Ballo. I think Koloko is gonna go. Be Oumar, and then on the bench you've got Pella, Adama Ball, and Dylan Anderson.
I'm curious how Azuolas bounces back. I think this could be the type of year where maybe we're talking about Azuolas to being a Pac-12 Player of the Year candidate, because I don't know, something to me there's something was off with him in the NCAA tournament. I'm not sure if it was what's going on back home in Lithuania, obviously with the Russian invasion of Ukraine and his family being right there. I mean, they're a neighboring country of a war zone. So I don't know if back home is bothering him, or if he just got season fatigue and it just finally came to a boiling point for him. But that was not the Azuolas Tubelis that we watched all season long. I mean, he went 2 for 15 in the final 2 games of the tournament against TCU and Houston.
Missed, and then
it wasn't
0
like
for 8 against.
But it wasn't like they were like mid-range jumpers, 3-pointers. Like, they were all at the rim.
You just couldn't finish. And he was trying to force it against Houston. I think Tommy tried to, this is speculation, but I think Tommy told him just go. Try to get something down, because he kept taking shots. And you're like, we're both sitting there watching like, why is Azuolas the only one trying to shoot right now?
Yeah.
He clearly didn't have it. It was frustrating to see from his perspective, because he's been such a force in some of the big games that Arizona's played in. You could just see that when Azuolas is able to run the floor, Arizona's offense just finds a different gear. But that was not the case in the NCAA tournament. And, I think he got out-muscled against TCU, and I think that was a little bit of a detriment to, his mental state, just the way he attacks it. And you could see he was trying to get something to go down against Houston. They were giving him the ball early, but then, with the opening 2 minutes, he gets a steal and then fumbles the ball out of bounds.
Yeah.
It was just, you knew from the get-go right there that something wasn't right.
And the kind of game that it was, for the first time this year, that's where I actually sat back and said, man, really interested to see how this game would be different if a guy like Kim Aiken was available. A guy who's been in college basketball for a minute, was a very tough guy, could also shoot pretty decently too, right?
Yeah.
Like, he showed that he can make, some outside jump shots early on, but he wasn't available. We still don't know what happened to Kim Aiken. I don't think we will get an answer. But he's no longer a part of the program. They removed his name from the website. So Kim Aiken's time at Arizona was short-lived. But now they go into the offseason. So you have the commits right now. You have Dylan Anderson, the 4-star forward from Phoenix area, coming in. Colin Boswell could reclassify. What's one type of player this team absolutely needs for next season?
Ooh.
Is it the Kim Aiken kind of role where it's like a versatile forward that could play either the 3 or the 4, can be a bruiser and a spark off the bench?
No, I think Kylan Boswell can be the missing piece because Arizona needed a guard. I think maybe it's a transfer portal guy too. Maybe the guy that Arizona needs isn't out there, but is out there in the portal. But I think they need a little bit stronger guard play. Ben Mathurin was great, but Kirk Kriisa had his fair share of struggles. Justin Kier, he had some really good moments, but you go in these NCAA tournament games and teams will slow you down and expose your flaws. And Arizona really got exposed against TCU and against Houston, just with some of its backcourt play. I think the front court's going to be fine. Azuolas Tubelis is going to improve. Umar Ballo is only going to get better. If Dalen Terry stays, right, like you're not concerned about anything about Dalen Terry's game. I think the weakness is going to be stronger, more physical guards that can attack the rim, because Arizona wasn't a great free throw shooting team, but a lot of that was because you had a lot of front court players taking those shots, and Koloko was much improved from the free throw line, but he's 70% guy. Azuolas Tubelis, he was really hitting some struggles from the line, and you think you need more guards that can attack the rim. And maybe Kylan Boswell is the answer. It could be a guy in the portal. And then just another version of Pelle Larsson, just a three-point shooter off the bench. Pelle was great. He was a really good defender at times. He brought a lot of scoring punch in the back half of the season after he recovered from his foot injury. So to me, it would be adding a more reliable, an extra reliable three-point shooter off the bench and getting some more physical guards.
Eric O'Brien asked, was the slap staged or real?
No, it was 100% staged.
Oh, you think so?
Yeah. Part of it.
Man.
The Oscars ratings have been hitting like all-time lows the last 4 years.
It got me to turn on the Oscars.
Exactly.
I will say that. My brother actually called me and said, dude, are you watching the Oscars right now? And I'm like, nah, I'm watching, I think I was either watching the Sopranos or like watching something else. And my brother was like, well, Will Smith just went on stage and slapped Chris Rock. And I stopped what I was doing and I turned on the Oscars.
Yeah.
So job well done.
I mean, was Will Smith mad? Absolutely. But you're telling me one of the most famous actors in Hollywood right now doesn't have the restraint, hasn't heard worse about.
Yeah.
Like there's probably been so many times when other people have said things about his wife and in different scenarios. You're telling me now, of all moments, you decide to like slap Chris Rock? Sure, I'm sure he was mad and maybe it wasn't planned, but I think part of it was to have some sort of interaction between them. You got a comedian and you've got Will Smith. There's no way that something wasn't up. Like the slap was absolutely real. Like he didn't hold back with the slap, but there's how many people are watching. Will Smith has to, if it wasn't 100% real, like it's totally on Will Smith to not have any sort of restraint, to be like, you're with all these celebrities and you're just going to walk up on stage and slap somebody and walk back down like it, and then whatever.
All I'm saying is
I'm rambling here, but it's staged.
All I'm saying is that St. Peter's was Will Smith and Chris Rock was all of our brackets. Mm-hmm. St. Peter's just came in and just smacked all of our brackets.
Yeah.
And that is that Doug Eatert guy?
Yes.
You see he's got an NIL deal with Buffalo Wild Wings?
Yeah.
Life comes at you fast, man. One
Make
day,
that money.
one day you're just a Cinderella story, just hoping for a good time in the NCAA tournament. Next thing you know, you're making that Buffalo Wild Wings
And
money.
then Seton Hall was on line 1 with Shaheen Holloway.
Yep.
Tears hadn't even dried in the locker room, and Shaheen Holloway is on his way to the Big East.
See you guys about speaking of going to the Big East, Sean Miller getting hired by Xavier. He's back, folks. Former Arizona coach hired at Xavier.
That was a great segue by us.
And he wasted no time referencing former Arizona football coach Rich Rodriguez. Did you hear about his recruiting tactics?
It was go after the OKGs?
Sean Miller actually said, we want to go after our kind of guys, the OKGs. Sean Miller actually said that in a press conference. And I'm like, wow.
Did he drop a Pittsburgh Steelers reference?
Wow, it's time. Yeah, time, man. How we got to this point where Sean Miller is back at his old stomping grounds, referencing Rich Rodriguez. It's a weird time in sports.
And of course, as only fate would have it, he was announced the day after Arizona lost.
When you know. All right, man. I think that's a good point to end our podcast. Man,
it all comes back to Sean Miller.
It all comes back to Sean Miller. Oh my gosh,
we run from it, hide from it. Destiny arrives all the same.
Can't get rid of him. All right, well, that'll do it for this episode of the Wildcast podcast. Again, thank you to all of those who submitted your questions on Twitter. We appreciate it. We're going to be doing more of these Twitter mailbags as we enter the off season. But even though Arizona basketball season has come to an end, still a great time to follow Arizona sports. Spring sports is happening right now. So, of course, you got baseball, softball. You have the golf programs doing big things right now. Then you also have Arizona spring football. Jed Fish and his staff going into year 2 of that regime. So a lot of big-time recruits and incoming freshmen are currently practicing for the Arizona Wildcats. Michael Lev, our colleague, has all the updates and stories on all things Arizona football. So it's still a good time to follow Arizona sports. And the only way to follow Arizona sports is by downloading the Wildcaster app for free off the App Store and Google Play. And also be sure to subscribe to the Wildcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening.